me get to my question.
Okay?
I don't watch a lot of television, I don't listen to any radio, I read what I do hear on television, something that strikes a nerve in me, what I do read on Facebook or on Twitter, or from politicians or public officials. They speak liberty, and in the same sentence or paragraph, they speak democracy. The question is, and we also hear military professionals that want to promote democracy throughout other countries that we're stationed in. Is America a republic or a democracy? Is there a difference?
Yes. There is a difference, and we are rapidly becoming a democracy, which is a real problem, because that's the tyranny of majority. And we're also a kleptocracy. And a kleptocracy. We're thieves. And we are a plutocracy. So we are putting all of our power into an executive at the moment and disempowering the other branches. We have a judiciary that is activist beyond belief. That started way back when we had the first issue with the Vice President of the United States. It was, I'll think of it in a minute. The Federalists and the Anti-Federalists were fighting this issue out when the Constitution was written in the Bill of Rights, saying that the judiciary was the safest branch of the government. It did not turn out to be the case. In 1802, an argument that was put forward that said that the Supreme Court has the right to decide whether or not something is constitutional. So it started failing in the very beginning. We started heading towards a democracy. We're at a point now where the low information voter, the people that do not actually understand what they're voting for, are voting against themselves without knowing it. Right now we have 47% of the population accepting some form of income or credit from the federal government. That's an incredible number. Where do we go when we're at 51%? When that happens, we're in deep, deep trouble. So right now we claim to be a republic. Most people don't know the difference between a republic and a democracy, but we're headed towards the tyranny of the majority, and we're in big trouble if we don't reverse it. Does that make any sense? Yes, I hope.
Did to me.
You have a question?
I got several, but I'll just give you one. There was a case a year or so ago. It was the Sackett family in Idaho. They were trying to build a house, and they were just about to pour the concrete when the EPA swooped in and said, "Oh no, you can't build. These are wetlands. And if you continue, we're going to find you some $10,000 a day," or some ridiculous figure like this. And they tried to challenge this threat from the EPA, and the EPA just said, well, you can't challenge it. And so they ultimately made their way to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court ruled on behalf of the Sackett family, but all they gained was the right to challenge this order, and they still can't build a house. To me, this seems like an abuse by a federal agency that is not rooted in liberty or anything guaranteed in the Constitution, certainly not property rights. What role do you think the state government in Idaho in this case could have played in that situation? Should the state government have stepped in any way to protect their citizens from the EPA in this situation, or?
Marbury versus Madison was the case in 1802. Sorry, I couldn't think of it. If I recall, the Sackett family actually was asked by the local authorities to clean up the wetland.
That's how it started.
Yeah, and there was a log jam preventing the water from actually flowing through their property. And so he went out at the request of the local authority to say, please, which was the Army Corps of Engineers, please remove that, no problem. So then they removed it, and that was the problem they started. Now they're living in a trailer house or something right now. They expended all their money on federal regulations and on the lawsuit, won in the Supreme Court, and then the federal agency came back and said, we don't care if you won or not, we're going to fine you every day. Correct?
Yeah, they're essentially, they've lost everything practically.
So it shouldn't be, the state, of course, should step in. The problem with the state, and they're not on federal lands, that's correct. It's their own property.
Yeah, I believe so.
And they had some, now, the water regulations that are trying to be passed right now by the federal government are navigable waterways of the United States, which is a whole nother issue that, ironically, back to the black helicopters, happens to be true, is a mandate by the United Nations about navigable waterways of the world, trying to take over the waterways of the United States through a mandate from the United Nations. Well, the problem with the state stepping in is we're being blackmailed by our own money. And what I mean by that, we send money to the federal government tells us they're going to attach these codicils to the money before they return it. So you can't depend on an organization like a state that depends on getting some of their own money back. It's much like when we say the federal government and their taxes is going to sit there, the government is giving me money back. No, you've given them an interest-free loan, and they're going to send some of it back to you based on the loopholes in the tax code and how those are manipulated on a regular basis. So what we need to do is be able to override the federal regulations. That requires a constitutional amendment, and we talked about this at one point. And you can read Mark Levin's book called The Liberty Amendments, wherein he outlines 11 different amendments. It turns out to be 10. He was in the Reagan administration in the Justice Department. He is the head of Landmark Legal Foundation. The book's on the bestseller list, New York Times bestseller list. And he outlines how to do this without calling a constitutional convention by using the state governments to call a convention themselves and change the Constitution so the people have a right through their legislations on the state level. Legislators can then change the Constitution so you can control the judiciary. And it's all outlined in the Constitution of the United States. And there's a great history of how that occurred. It's really an amazing thing. The Anti-Federalists brought that to be. We always hear about the Federalist Papers. The Anti-Federalists demanded that.
Listen to the old man. Listen to the old man. Listen to the old man. When you can.